So in the previous video, I spoke a little bit about people pleasing. To start with, I'm just going to share a story as usual. So I was basically at this retreat. One of the first activities we did was understanding our boundaries. In this activity, we were told to just go around the room and just ask questions to people with the intent to receive a no and with the intent to give a no, and notice how we were feeling. Upon the reflections, a lot of people were feeling this sense of guilt. They just didn't want to say no because they didn't want to upset the other person. And that really came down to this sense of people pleasing. And when we people please, we're trying to protect other people's emotions. Like when I was younger and I gained these tendencies to people please, it was because I was protecting my mother's emotions, for example. So particularly around when my parents got divorced, it was a very emotional experience, and I was very angry and had a lot of emotions, but seeing how upset my parents were, I didn't want to upset them even more. And so I just suppressed whatever it is that I was feeling. And so these kind of tendencies led to people pleasing. But down the line, when I was at this retreat and I was doing this activity, I found that actually I had the opposite problem, especially when it came to my personal space. I had this fence around me. So I actually learned how to say no, especially when it came to my relationship world, like the dating life and relationships, let's just say. When I was a teenager, I got diagnosed with cancer at the age of 16, bearing in mind that I went to an all-girls secondary school. And so I wasn't interacting with the opposite sex. I didn't have any brothers. I wasn't exposed to boys really. And my memories of them was kicking a football around a football field because I was very sporty in primary school. That was a mixed school. And we were just out playing football and out playing like normal kids, right? And so throughout my secondary school, I wasn't getting that exposure. And then all of a sudden, between the ages of 16 and 18, I'm now bubbled in hospital environments, going in and out of, school, but I was still within a girls' school. And by sixth form, only a few boys had joined. It was a mixed sixth form, but then because it was still amongst a girls' school, there was 5 boys or something like that. And so I just didn't really have much exposure. So when I overcame the cancer thing, I got through treatment, and then I had started university, and I was now reintegrating back into reality, back into the real world. But I had gone from a teenage body, because I was a bit of a late bloomer, into a woman's body throughout that period. And I actually found the male attention very overwhelming. It was almost like they had this 18 and legal radar or something. And I just found them very weird, a bit sometimes inappropriate, a bit full on. And I just basically found myself putting walls around myself as a means to protect myself because I didn't really particularly feel safe. I remember once being at a station and I didn't know which direction to go. And I just asked one of the staff members, who was a young man, in which direction is the tube? And he was like, I'll take you there if you want. And it was no, thank you. I'll find my way. And I just kind of was struggling to find my way, at which point he felt a bit I don't know, guilty, rejected. I don't know how he felt, but he would just quickly just pointed in the direction. But it was those things where I'm just innocently just finding my way around life. And I'm just getting this inappropriateness, let's just say. And that was really off-putting. And so basically, I just put boundaries up and it was just a no to everything. And so for me, it was learning boundaries in a way to understand what are my true boundaries, not just my fences out of fear because I've had this experience. And so interestingly, when it comes to helping people with their boundaries, if they don't know, some people's boundaries are basically here. That's not their true boundaries. And they find themselves getting walked all over, getting very angry, constantly people pleasing, but feeling very drained because they haven't learned where their true boundaries are. And the same with mine. It was just, at least in that part of my life, it was very much I'll just shut everybody out kind of situation. And so I found it really useful to actually just think about it, because I know in some schools they teach boundaries, but I mean, when I was growing up, they didn't. And so growing into an adult, I just had no concept of what boundaries even were. Like, it just something I never even thought about. And in this experience gave me that opportunity to reflect, to feel into it, to understand like where those boundaries actually are. And so if this is something you're struggling with, completely understandable. Everybody has their own experiences, and some people just go through really challenging stuff. And like, I know some people that I've interacted with are like, why is she like that? Like, if they don't know my background or my history and they've just met me, and maybe it is more of a dating scene or whatever, and like I could tell that they're questioning like, why is she like this? But they don't know my background. And so you just don't know what people have gone through when you're interacting with people. And when people are being forward and they're not quite getting the response, it's so easy to take that personally as well. But oftentimes, like, it's like you just don't know what that person has gone through. So yeah, like, one, it was really important to understand my own boundaries. And secondly, it was also really interesting to learn how to receive the no and understanding other people's boundaries. Because I've also been in situations where I'm like, no, I don't like to be touched that way, or in this environment, or whatever. And it's almost like that person sees it as a test to try and push those boundaries and push those boundaries. And like, if someone doesn't understand boundaries, like, it's a problem. And if someone's asserting their boundaries and like you're trying to push over those boundaries, like, it becomes very non-consensual. Like, it's just not, like, it's not a safe relationship if somebody, one, doesn't know their boundaries, and so they're constantly being walked all over because they don't know their boundaries, but they're also not communicating their boundaries because they don't know their boundaries. That just leaves someone feeling like, even to the extent of feeling raped, you know, it goes to those kind of extremes. I'm sorry if that was a trigger for anybody who's watching. But also, if that person that you have asserted boundaries with isn't respecting those boundaries, it's also a very like unsafe relationship to be in both those cases. And so it was just a really interesting experience to go through. And I've been through a couple retreats like that where we have covered boundaries. And I just found, of all the activities to actually experience, like, if I was ever to run a retreat, like, that would be one of the things that I would add in, just because I found it so useful. So yeah, if this is something that you have literally just come across and is something that you haven't really thought about and would like to work with somebody to understand those emotions of like anger. I've covered anger before, people pleasing, anything to do with like boundaries from a physical standpoint. I am trained in these things. So if you would like to reach out to somebody to get some support to work through these things so that you can live a life feeling a lot more safe in your body and understanding how to communicate those things with other people, so that you have a much happier life, and less experiences that are kind of traumatizing you along the way, because those things just aren't being communicated. And it's so easy to happen, right? Just because it hasn't been communicated. And funny enough, not funny, but actually, when you go into, if somebody who does know how to respect boundaries and you haven't communicated your boundaries, it becomes really disheartening for that person because they don't want to hurt you in any way, right? In a lot of cases, nobody wants to hurt you. And it's just a case of it wasn't communicated. And so they've thought things were okay when actually it wasn't. And so that's another thing. So I have a link in the description below. If it's something that you want to talk with someone about or get some support with, or however you want to go through that, then reach out. I'm very friendly. And yeah, I hope to speak with you soon. So thank you for listening, and see you next time.